But meanwhile, let me bring in for some analysis here former Pennsylvania Democratic Governor Ed Rendell and Matt Schlapp. He's a Republican strategist, former White House political director for President George W. Bush. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. Greatly appreciate it. And again, apologies to our audience with the mic issue with Katie. We'll go back. But Matt, let's start with you. Donald Trump going after the Des Moines Register in that name-calling fashion we've all become familiar with. But this new ABC News Washington Post poll shows he's got a double-digit lead there. What's your take that's happening here?
And he's running against all the people that have done this before and all the insiders and all the people in kind of the Republican political class. And look, taking on a big liberal newspaper isn't going to hurt him either. All of these people that are trying to diminish him are actually building him up, because there's a constituency out there in the country that likes this idea of the outsider taking on Washington.
So as I mentioned, you were the political director for President George W. Bush. You see there, he's ahead of Jeb Bush by 12 points there.
Right.
Is that about the Bush brand? What do you believe is happening there?
Well, there's no question that one of the things that Jeb has to do during this nominating process is make the case that he is the right guy to lead the Republican Party against the most likely Democratic nominee, Hillary Clinton. He has to make the case on his record and his own merits. Obviously, using his last name could be a negative, and I think he fully acknowledges that. This is America. This is a democracy. We like having new leaders. So, but the poll itself, I worry less about, because these polls are going to change a lot. This race is very free-flowing. We really don't have a front runner, and it's just going to be it's a long period of time till we know who our nominee is going to be.
Well, that is all very true, but right now, Governor Rendell, you see the headlines as Matt does as well, and it seems as if Donald Trump, some describe it as taking the oxygen in the room or out of the room, and others describe it as setting the tone for the GOP and the debates, which will start here very soon.
Well, it's interesting. Donald Trump has done a great job making this all about Donald Trump. There is no oxygen left for anybody, and that's good from his standpoint. It's good from our standpoint, Democrats, because we would love to see Donald be the nominee. But for him, the struggle is going to be to get from where he is now. He certainly hit a responsive chord with the angry Republican primary voter. And that's about 20–25% of the electorate. But for him to get more than that and become a real factor in this race, August 6th is going to be a very important day, Cameron. He's got to look presidential. He can't just throw bombs in that debate. He's got to say substantive things that people look at him and say, gosh, he's not just a guy who makes me feel good because he's captured my anger. He's a guy who could be president.
Well, that sounds great, but he has taken, Governor, the opposite approach, and it's worked for him. So if you are Trump and his team and you're there and you hear people come on our air and just about everywhere else and say that it's not likely that he will get the nomination, he may say, listen, I've got the roadmap that none of you saw coming. Who would have predicted that Donald Trump at this point, still early in the game, would be leading Jeb Bush and Scott Walker double digits? Who would have called that,
but
Governor?
Cameron, later in the game, in 4 years ago, Herman Cain was leading the poll.
That's right.
Herman Cain, remember, was number one. So don't go too overboard over these polls.
Well, here's the thing.
And
this is the difference that I believe. This is the difference. Herman Cain had to, at some point, look for donors. Donald Trump, as it's been cited for at least right now, does not have to bow down to a particular donor group. Those who are said to be mad, for example, in the conservative wing of the party about comments he made regarding John McCain. Right now, he's financing his own campaign, and that gives him a level of power that the other candidates do not have, including Herman Cain at the time.
That's a very good point.
Look, if you look at what's happened with campaign finance reform, the leading candidates have massive amounts of money to spend on their own campaign committees. They also have these super PACs, so they have a lot of resources as well. This is not for a reason of finance that Donald Trump is striking a chord. He's striking a chord for the reasons that he's running against Washington. And second of all, Governor Rendell, I think you would agree, he's also reaching out to these types of voters that even Bill Clinton reached out to in 1992. These are middle-class voters that are worried about their economic future. They haven't seen their incomes rise over the course of the last decade or longer. There are real economic issues that he is striking a chord with.
Yeah, but Matt, no. He has not talked about how he plans to put money in the pockets of those people. He's talked about how he has money. The only idea that he's come out with, and if you want to call it an idea, is one of fear of Mexicans coming to this country.
I just think that's too trite.
But
That's
no.
too trite.
Then tell us how he's described how he will put money in the pockets of those middle-class people you say former President Clinton appealed to. What's his
Because I
money
think
plan?
there are a lot of Republican voters who believe that the politicians don't really understand how to get the economy right. And they like the idea of someone like a Donald Trump or a Carly Fiorina, somebody who's not necessarily coming from the elected world, but coming from the private economy.
But Carly Fiorina's not even showing up on polls. She may
Yes,
she may not be on the debate stage.
She may not be. That's right.
So if her plan is appealing, why isn't she showing up to be on the?
Let me make my point here, because maybe you and I just fundamentally disagree. The outsiders in these races are doing well. By the way, we're not talking about the Democrats, but Bernie Sanders is doing very well. Yes, he's an elected official, but he's running against the Democratic machine. And he's doing great. He's raising a lot of money. He's doing great in these polls. These outside candidates are really true with the time in politics today.
So, Governor, do you see this as, when you talk about, and I think Carly Fiorina may oppose the idea of her being linked in with Donald Trump, but with that said, do you believe, and I think she would, do you believe what Matt is saying regarding that Trump, Carly Fiorina are appealing to this economic anger, if we can describe it as that some middle-class people are having, even though we're doing better in this country than we were in 2008?
They are. There's no question about that. But the key for them, and Donald Trump's got to continue to bottle that anger up in the debate, but he's got to start, and you made this point, he's got to start putting a little meat on the bones. He can't just say, I'm a businessman, I made a lot of money, I know how to create jobs. He's going to have to start telling us how he's going to do it. Remember, this is still August. The general election is 14 months away. The primaries don't start for another 5 months. Herman Cain had the same problem. You're right, he didn't have the money Donald had, but Donald's going to have to start convincing people by saying substantive things. He can still do the anger, and he can still try to hit that responsive chord, but he's got to put